Welcome to day 129 of our scripture reading and daily encouragement. Today we're covering 1 Chronicles 24, 25, and 26. Then we're going to jump over into John chapter 11 and finish out the story of Lazarus by covering verses 28 through 44. As we pick up in 1 Chronicles, they're laying out the duties of the priest, the musicians, the gatekeepers, the treasurers, the officials of the kingdom. Remember, they're going back and reminding themselves who they were. And it was important for them to understand their lineage and where these people, as they came back into Israel, where they would fit. So I come from a lineage. I've been cast out of my land into Babylon. I'm coming back into my land. Now, what do I do? Am I a priest? Am I a musician? Am I a gatekeeper? Am I a treasurer? Do I have some other official role in the kingdom? We're going to cover tomorrow, am I in the military? You had to know where you fit in as you came back in. So they had gone through early in 1 Chronicles the lineage that led up to King David. Then they present King David, this mighty king and warrior. And now they're trying to lay out where they fit into the mix, so to speak. A couple of interesting things. David was a musician from the beginning. He played the harp to soothe Saul. We see here he had 288 musicians. I love this because it shows us the heart of God in terms of God loves it when we bring music to him. Don't take it for granted, guys. If you're driving down the road and you turn on your favorite Christian radio or Spotify playlist with Christian music or Apple playlist or whatever it is, and you're singing your heart out while you're driving down the road when no one else can hear, or in the shower or whatever it is, God loves that. Continue to do that. I want to encourage you on that. It'll bring joy to the Lord. It'll bring joy to you. It was also interesting to point out that all of these people, priests, musicians, they all got their ranks, so to speak, by lots being drawn. So that was sort of like us being like we would pull a number out of a hat. And that's how they got their position identified to them. Obviously, they were trusting that God would put the people in the right order. I just think it's interesting how they assign their ranks. If I were to compare this a little bit to us, we live in a country, and many of us feel like our country has gotten away from the roots of our country. Our country started out with very strong leaders. Everything was built around "In God We Trust." Our Constitution was written a certain way to protect our rights. And now we find ourselves, this many years later, looking back saying, man, what would our forefathers think? Our forefathers, and we list them out. Who signed the Declaration of Independence? Who wrote the Constitution? What our rights were and all that. That's sort of what they're doing here. They're looking back and saying, this is what it was originally supposed to be. So I'm trying to put it into terms that maybe we would understand a little bit better. If our country went into complete exile and then we were able to come back to America, we would be looking back to the roots of our country and the original forefathers and Constitution to understand what we were or who we are, so we can try to get back to that. And that's what they were doing here. But when they're looking back, their Constitution, so to speak, would be the law of Moses. Law given to Moses, I should say, by God. And their forefathers would be all this lineage of people. So I know this seems really boring as we read through all of this, but it was super important to them as they reminded and tried to get back to who they used to be as they came back into their land. As we flip over into John, we remember we're in the middle of a story of Lazarus being raised from the dead. Jesus has come to Mary and Martha's house. Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. Jesus tells Martha, your brother will rise again. And she's thinking that Jesus means when he comes back, when all the dead will rise. And Jesus says, he reminds her, I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me, anyone who believes in Jesus will live in eternity with me, long after human death. And Martha says, yes, Lord, I believe. I've always believed you're the Messiah, the Son of God. And we see this faith in her. You know, earlier in the story with Mary and Martha, he's criticizing her because she's trying to get everything too perfect and not spending time with him. But now she gets who he is. Jesus sends her to go get Mary. Mary falls at Jesus' feet, and we see a little bit of a different Mary because Mary was there listening to Jesus earlier in the story, but now she doesn't have the faith that her sister Martha has. She's weeping. If only you've been here, Jesus. And here's a key thing. I'm going to focus on this for a minute. We see Jesus get angry. It says a deep anger welled up within him. A deep anger welled up within him. Why would Jesus be angry? And I think the best way I can answer that is Jesus would be, in our terms, he'd be like, you should not doubt my power. Why are you doubting my power and what I can do? You're doubting this can still happen. And he was angry with them. Now, it's hard for us to see or think of Jesus being angry because we often assign anger with the actions that come out of our anger, which are often sinful actions. But I want to be careful here. There's nothing wrong with anger. Now, what anger can turn into can be the problem. And we see that here with Jesus. It says he's angry. It says a deep anger welled up within him, but you didn't see him going off on anybody. You didn't see him cussing somebody out. You didn't see him punching somebody or stabbing them with a sword. You didn't see his actions turn into sin because he had an emotion of anger within him. We see here that Jesus doesn't like doubt. The people's doubt of his power. Jesus had spent a lot of time with these people earlier. We've covered that in other stories. He had spent a lot of time with them. They should know who he is. He expects them to know who he is and not to doubt his power. And I think that's why he's angry. Now, I want to talk for just a minute because sometimes we throw around this term of righteous anger. Somebody gets angry, they do something stupid, and they come back and say, but it was righteous anger. It's not righteous anger if it leads to a sin. Jesus here, I'm going to say it again, Jesus was angry, but the actions that came out of his emotion were not sinful. Therefore, we can call that righteous anger. But if we get angry and we go and do something that leads to sin, no matter what the intention was, if you call my God a fake and it makes me angry, and I would call that at the core a righteous anger, but I'll walk over and punch you in the face, now I've not treated you the way I would want to be treated. I've not loved you as my neighbor or my enemy. I'm going against the commands of Jesus. I'm just making up an example here. My righteous anger just turned to unholy anger as I came over and did an unholy action. Does that make sense? We can't get angry and justify it with righteous anger when it leads to sin. That's not righteous anger at all. I think anger can be unrighteous, and I think anger can be unrighteous and caused out of fear. And maybe sometimes it's hard to tell, but if you come and you tell me that my God is wrong, or that my God is not real, or that this scripture I'm reading is not real, that is probably going to frustrate me and make me angry, because I'm going to defend my God. I'm going to defend his power. I'm going to defend his word. But I can't let that turn into an action of yelling, screaming, harm. Okay, now let's talk about an unhealthy anger. I don't get my way. I can't control what you're doing, and it makes me angry. See, a lot of times anger comes out of fear. So I have a fear. I can't control that fear, so now I get angry. If I were to ask my child to do something, and my child doesn't do what I asked them to do, so I couldn't control their action. I told them what to do. I couldn't control their action. And maybe I have a fear rise up that I'm not a good father, or that my child won't listen to me, or that my child's never going to listen to me, and I get angry and strike my child. That's not a righteous anger, because my anger was driven out of fear and my lack of control in that fear. Does that make sense? However, if you come to me and you tell me God's a fake, God's not real, I've got a right to be angry because you doubt in God that I believe in, but that doesn't justify me having an action of sin. I could talk for days on this, so I hope that makes sense. I'm trying to differentiate that there is a such thing as a righteous anger, so to speak, that we see here with Jesus. He's angry because they doubt. But we can't justify our anger actions that aren't righteous because we saw Jesus get angry one time and flip tables, and because we saw Jesus get angry one time when people doubted his healing ability or his resurrection from the dead ability. Does that make sense? If that doesn't make sense, please seek me out and let's talk more about that, because this is a deeper discussion. It's a deep topic because a lot of people do struggle with anger. But Jesus didn't create a sin reaction as the point out of his anger. He asked where Lazarus, he simply said, "Where have you put him?" He was it says a deep anger welled up within him. He was deeply troubled, and he simply asked a question, "Where have you put him?" They told him where they had put him. "Lord, come and see." And it says Jesus wept. He was sad because his friend had died. This is an interesting thing because we see the human side of Jesus where he weeps because his friend has died, but he's angry because they don't trust his power. So it says a deep anger wells up within him. He asks where Lazarus is. Then he weeps, but it says he was still angry as he arrived at Lazarus' tomb. And Jesus said, "Roll the stone aside." But Martha, the dead man's sister, protested, "Lord, he's been dead for 4 days." So we see this faith that she has a few verses earlier in him being the Messiah, but she still lacks faith here. "Lord, he's been dead for 4 days. The smell will be terrible." Can you imagine? You ever smelled roadkill after 4 days? Can you imagine a human body sitting, and they didn't have the embalming techniques we have today? The smell would have been awful. Verse 40, it says, Jesus responded, Didn't I tell you you would see God's glory if you believe? If you believe. You will see God's glory. In other words, if you want to see healing, we talked about this before, you have to believe. You have to have faith. Jesus prays, and Lazarus is raised from the dead. Why? To show the power, the glory of God. So my encouragement to you today, don't doubt God. Don't doubt his abilities. We see here that if you doubt what Jesus can do, it makes him angry. I don't want to make Jesus angry. So let's avoid his anger by believing, by not doubting. Hope you're encouraged today, and I hope you have a great day.